bowling alleys, everything you want. And rent-free houses for married workers. See the difference? But what they didn't want to do is say white and white privilege and blacks and non-privilege. So they called it gold and silver rule. So the whites got paid in gold. Now let me just add, most of these whites who went to Panama were southern whites from America, and we all Confederate whites, so to speak. And they got paid in gold. Blacks, on the other hand, got paid in silver. Some got paid in the local currency, which was the Balboa. And quite often, that pay was about 2 to 3 weeks late. Look at the benefits. Whites got 42 days paid vacation, 30 days paid sick leave, free benefits and services, and of course wages in gold. Blacks, and these are the ones who were on contracts, by the way, the blacks who got a contract. Quite a lot of blacks just turned up for work. They didn't have contracts. 72 in a hut, 50 feet by 30. Mess halls with no tables or chairs, so maybe they have to eat on the floor. 8,000 a day eating. Wages paid in silver, often 2 to 3 weeks later. These are the ones who had contracts. They had mess halls to eat in. The ones who didn't have a contract got cheese. And this is a queue of silver people waiting to be paid. I've got quite a few pictures. Okay? And this is testimony by a reporter called S.W. Plume. And he was sent by his newspaper to report on the canal, or something on the canal, because word started getting up that things weren't very good on the canal. And his report read, it was the same way, bury, running 2, 3, and 4 trains a day, with dead Jamaican niggers all the time. It did not matter any difference whether they were black or white. To see the way they died there, they died like animals. This was from S.W. Now what's this one all about? Any idea? Any suggestions as to what this is about? No? Sorry? This article came from Popular Science magazine, 1875. Everything about the mortality rate is guesswork. Educated guesses hobbled together by reports from journalists, eyewitnesses, and U.S. congressional hearings. These estimates range from 22,000 to 82,000 deaths. There were so many bodies to dispose of that the railway officials began to treat them as commodities. The railway pickled the corpses of the nameless dead in wooden barrels and sold them to medical schools. Income generated from the cadaver business was sufficient to maintain the railway's own gleaming new whites only hospital. When I said I strip away the romance, this is what I'm talking about. This is the reality. This is what was happening on the ground. People died, there were so many of them. The railway decided to make money out of the dead bodies. So you can imagine some poor mother in Jamaica. Oh, George has gone off to Panama and hasn't had the decency to write a letter to know he's getting on. Now, where's George? On some university or research hospital being carved up. I'm sorry? But it was anything. In fact, things got so bad that the only thing some of these poor workers had going for them was their belief in God. They believed. So the cemetery was called Monkey Hill, not because of anything derogatory, but by virtue of the fact that there were monkeys on there. And so they asked to have the name of the cemetery changed from Monkey Hill to Mount Hope. Because that's all they had left. And although conditions were that bad, to some degree they were better than what they left. From an income perspective, meaning that they were actually working and they'd be earning a few pennies more. But in every other regard, and this charming lady spent some time there as well, because her brother ran a small hotel next to the railway. And she was one of the first people actually to make the distinction between malaria and mosquitoes. But nobody paid her any regard. She was one of the first people who said, you know, there's a connection between mosquitoes and malaria. And you know who she is, yes? Mm-hmm. And then we come to the second phase, which is where Ferdinand de Lesseps, the Frenchman who had just finished building the Suez Canal, put together a company and said, yes, I can build a ship canal across Panama. It's a double canal. If I just finished, a lot of bravado, I was just finishing the Suez, I can build Panama. So he went there, had a look around, and yeah, brilliant, I can do this. Totally underestimated what was required of him. And the death toll under his stewardship was approximately 22,000, and again, totally understated. Mainly from Jamaica, yes? Mainly from Jamaica. Remember, they didn't keep any records for blacks. Let me say at this point that Matthew, if I may mention you, has written a book, Hell's Gorge. One of the worst aspects of this, one of the worst parts of the canal, is when they had to cut through the mountain range, which was about 8 miles long. Now, I don't know how good your geography is. Running along the west coast of both North and South America is a mountain range. In the north, in North America, it's called the Rockies. In the south, it's called the Andes. In Panama, it's not thousands of feet up tall. So they selected one of the lowest points. They call them the Cordilleras in that section of the isthmus. Okay, remember, no country called Panama yet. So the highest elevation was probably about 300 to 500 feet above sea level. But it was sheer, hard rock. 8 miles long. And the Lesseps made quite a few mistakes. One of them was thinking that he could cut right through this 8-mile section of rock and link the Atlantic to the Pacific on a level basis, yes? And that was part of his downfall, which was concerned. the main causes of death between 1881 and 1889, that's during the tenure of the Lesseps and his French company, train derailments, falls from trains on dirt carts, being crushed under landslides. Landslides is great stuff because of the topography of the region. You can see when I show you some more slides exactly why landslides were such an issue. And suffocation from noxious gases. Here you're talking about bottomless slopes. Apparently, one of the engineers was trying to, they were using the railway to take the spoil up when they were digging. He had to build this bridge to get across the slope, and it was just almost endless. And he reported to his supervisor and said, just can't finish this job. The supervisor talked him out of retiring or resigning. He said, go on, finish it. Whatever it takes, just finish it. 180 feet down before they could hit any kind of solid foundation where they could actually, secure the bridge. You have to use pontoons. Now here's a picture, and you can see the danger here. I kept this particular caption for a reason. Steam shuttle at Canal Zone. The person who took this picture was more interested in the steam shuttle over here, to the left, than 150 men, black men, down in. And quite often what would happen is that the sides up there to the left, to the right, would just cave in, and they would leave those men in the same place. Just find somewhere else to be. Okay. You're all very quiet. Remember I said that some of the men were on contracts, and they used the mess hall when they were eating. What about those who didn't have contracts? Well, they had to cook by the wayside. And quite often, due to the low wages and the lack of facilities, their food was not very nourishing. So they became what we would call run down, yes? And because of the health issues, the weakness of their immune system, due to lack of proper nourishment, they succumb quite readily to sickness, mosquito bites, malaria from the mosquito, the dengue fever, the yellow fever. In actual fact, quite often there were so many men off work that the construction had to slow for a little while. But then remember too that there were always people willing to come in, because at that time unemployment was rife, and there's always someone waiting to had no end of candidates. No, they didn't think it was waiting to die. That was an everyday occurrence, and they were willing to put up with that.
Sorry, distracted.
Drilling holes for blasting at Calibrica. This is where they were going through that 8-mile stretch of mountains. The most dangerous part of the whole operation. Landslides, they had to use dynamite, and some of these men had never seen dynamite before. Very, very volatile it was. Thank you, Harry. Now you can roll up the popcorn, yeah?
Fruits.
Some of these men had never seen dynamite before. Very volatile stuff. In actual fact, I came across some reports that said that sometimes in the heat, some of these men would sweat so profusely, and this sweat was warm. And if it landed on any of this dynamite, they would explode. And this was perhaps one of the most dangerous jobs. what used to happen as well is that sometimes men not accustomed to working with this type of technology as it existed then, or dynamite, would touch wires together when they shouldn't have done it, bang, off for an explosion. And quite often too, the men had medication for their malaria. And the standard medication at that time was quinine. And they were so overdosed with quinine that they became dead. So that sometimes when the shout or the alarm went out to say they're going to blast, they never heard. Okay? And then, of course, you know what happens next. And here is another picture of powder men. Each of those boxes weighs about 50 pounds and carries dynamite. And this was the worst job in the whole operation. Landslides I touched on earlier, they were frequent occurrence. And here's a picture of one where you can see this train here on the left, covered by mud. Now we don't know whether there were people here, we can only assume that there were. But because of the nature, of the topography of the type of rock and everything, quite often this would happen. And when the land slid away, sometimes it would take the cranes with it. So these cranes would come crashing down as well on the men who were actually in the ditch, as they call it, working in the hole. And the official name for this particular area was the Calibra, but Hell's Gorge was the popular name that the men used for that particular area, Hell's Gorge, because they knew what it was. That, in fact, was part of the living hell that I referred to at the start of the presentation. And to cheer themselves up, they actually made up a dirge. For those who don't know, a dirge is a funeral song. Okay? And they used to sing this all the time. Fever and ague all day long at Panama, Wish